You are listening to the Bright Life Podcast, all about ways to stay inspired, chase your dreams, and find more gratitude in the highs and lows of the journey. I'm your host, Jessica Johnson. I'm a business owner, a part-time digital nomad, a self-growth junkie, a believer in other big-hearted women, and am all about sharing tips, tricks, lessons learned, and encouragement so we can all live our biggest, brightest lives. You ready? Let's do this. Hello and welcome to today's episode. Today I have someone who's going to just share so much value with you in terms of if you've ever thought of starting your own business, of maybe even leaving a corporate career or evolving out of a certain career path or industry. She has so much wisdom and experience to share on all of these things. So I think you're going to love this episode. Her name is Julia Hickman, and she is an entrepreneur, wife, and mother of two living in New Jersey. She left her corporate career in data analytics to become a stay-at-home parent to her first child, and soon realized this was the ideal time to bring to reality her desire to be an entrepreneur. She started blogging and then became an online fitness and lifestyle coach, helping entrepreneurial and professional women make time for fitness and self-care. And she eventually shifted gears and decided to go all in on supporting heart-centered entrepreneurs, helping them focus on their brilliance by becoming their strategic partner in elegantly launching and managing profitable podcasts that lead to engaged audiences and high-ticket sales. See, she has so much to share. So welcome, Julie. I'm so glad to have you here.
I am so happy to be here, Jessica. Thank you so much for having me on. I am just so looking forward to this chat and sharing a little bit more about my story and hopefully providing the listeners with some value and some inspiration so that they can get out there and get some stuff done too.
Absolutely. And now, did you know that you always wanted to be an entrepreneur?
No, absolutely not. So I guess I had the dream of being a business owner, but it was more of a brick and mortar business. So I remember being 16 and I was dating this guy who was a personal trainer. So we talked about opening up a gym one day, So that was my idea of business. I had no idea that the online world existed, or it just was not on my radar. And then it wasn't until I was in corporate and kind of switched careers a little bit. I was in retail management and then worked for a big publishing company. And in all of the jobs that I had, I always felt like I got to the point where I would climb up, I would get that promotion, climb up a little bit up the corporate ladder. And then it was like, oh, all that work and this, and I'd just be so disappointed and so exhausted. And, it was like minuscule raises every year. And I was just so I don't know, just disappointed. And but I felt like there was something wrong with me. I was like, oh, maybe I'm just in the wrong field. Maybe I should have gotten my MBA. Maybe I just, it was always about maybe I'm lacking something. And then when I was pregnant at the publishing company, I went to my boss and I was like, hey, I totally can do this job from home. Can you, would it be okay if I could work from home a couple days a week? And he gave me a verbal okay. But then a month before I was supposed to go back, him and I had a meeting and he's like, look, I have a new boss and he wants you in the office every day. And I was like, what? I had already planned everything. I'd hired a nanny. Everything was lined up for that to happen. And so that was a big blow. And I had talked to my husband a little bit about staying home with our son, but it was more of well, maybe go back to work for a year and then, and then, let's save a little bit of money. And then, I mean, not that we weren't saving money, but, for to stay home. And so, yeah, we had to kind of expedite that because we decided no, this is not happening. My commute was kind of long. I mean, by the time I got home, I would just like pretty much be saying goodnight to the baby and that's it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not the life that I want to live. Like, and luckily for us, it was okay. I mean, it was still kind of scary, but it was, we were able to make that decision financially. But it was still scary because it meant, having to be a lot smarter with spending and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted to do something like have a little side hustle so that I felt like I was still contributing financially a little bit. So I was a personal trainer and I was working at a friend's gym, and still it didn't like I had the idea. I was like, okay, maybe I could still do that whole having my own gym thing, but it wasn't quite it. I was like, I feel like there's something out there that I just haven't tapped into that is probably the thing for me. And I've always been a personal development junkie, so I've always done a lot of reading and just really been into personal growth. So um, I felt like I was being led to something, but I just didn't
Mhm.
quite know what it was yet. And
Mhm.
um, I knew that, I knew that I was going to be okay no matter what. So I had that sort of like confidence, even though I was kind of nervous. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. But I knew that, like I had to just keep learning. And this is like, I kind of wished I had a coach back then because I
Mhm.
had to do a lot of like digging around on my own and reading and researching and looking things up. And I eventually started an online fitness business, and I did that for a few years, and it was great. I was working with a lot of women who were in similar places as I was. So they were moms with young kids, they were entrepreneurs, some of them were still in corporate. So we had a lot of things in common. And I did that for a few years, but then got to the point where I was like, I don't know. I don't really love working with people in a group format.
Mhm.
I feel like this still isn't quite it. And at that point, I was pregnant with my daughter and took a little bit of time to figure things out. And yeah, to make a long story short, I'll kind of stop there so you can ask me any questions that you want to ask.
Mhm.
But that's kind of like where I created this new business of really helping people with their podcasts, and also like doing some organic marketing coaching now too. And it's all been about like trusting that intuition and just like knowing that you don't have to be stuck where you are, and sometimes you have to
Mhm.
like take that scary action, um, and as long as you have that desire to go somewhere with it, then you're going to be in the right place, because there's no such thing as a perfect place, but there is such thing as like the right place for you at the right time. And yeah, so that's a little bit about my story and how
Mhm.
I got to where I am now.
Yeah, I love so many parts of that. Like, I think even just what you said about trusting your intuition, and almost there were so many parts where you took the right step for then, and you got to feel that out sometimes for even years before that inkling would come back that it's like almost it's time for a change or it's time to pivot to this next thing. But how interesting that you almost don't get that until you take those first steps and go through the process, and then it's revealed to you kind of your next stage almost.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And I think that some people might think, like, if someone else was in my shoes, they might feel like, oh, but, I've changed businesses a couple times and I changed jobs in corporate a few times, and, it means that I've failed, right? And to me, it's like, no, it just means that every situation led me to the next thing, which has brought me closer to what I'm doing now, which like I so love. And to
Yeah.
me, it's been stepping stones. And like, someone was asking me, she was like, do you wish that you had a coach who would have just kind of like helped you right after you left your corporate job, like somebody that helped you like launch your current business. And I'm like, I feel like I would have liked a coach to maybe help me with the fitness business, because I totally don't regret my fitness business. It still has such a big place in my heart. And I still actually work with, very occasional one-on-one clients. Um, but it's just not like the big focus of what I'm looking to scale. But yeah, so yeah, I see the value of having had somebody to help me with that first business, but I still don't like, I don't wish like that business never existed, because it's
Yeah.
definitely a lot of what I learned in that business is what is really helping me to grow this one in a way that I'm growing it much quicker than the first one. And it just like feels so much more smooth and just like more aligned.
Yeah. I 100% agree with even for my first businesses, which were also health related, or my first business, where I do sometimes have that feeling of like, man, what would have happened if I had known to hire a private coach who could have helped that business from the beginning? But almost like you described in taking courses and kind of like finding your own way, I do think it led to things that I never would have found if I wasn't trying so hard to figure things out myself. Like teachers, authors, Joe Dispenza, like the mindset work that I did, the groups that I found who were talking about way bigger numbers that I'd even ever thought of at that point. I'm like, that kind of, even if it is a winding path from an outside perspective, it's still serving you. And almost like you can have no regrets about that then, because you know that you were led on that path for a reason, and look at all it's giving you, even in the detours almost.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I was just actually working on someone's podcast, and there was a quote there where they said there's always a lesson if you're willing to look for it. And I'm like, yeah, that makes so much sense, and I can so relate to that, because we can so easily look at our situations and be like, oh, this just didn't work out and this was wrong and I wish I didn't do this and I wish I didn't do that. And it's like, but what are the lessons that you learn? And I feel like sometimes having those lessons are more important than having had like no bad situations that ever happen, or no bad circumstances
Yeah.
that ever happen. And it's like in the moment it feels tough and it's like frustrating, but afterwards when you can look back and be like, oh, I'm so glad that I did learn those lessons, because now I feel like I'm a stronger person, a better um, you know, a better entrepreneur, someone who just like a more
Hmm.
confident entrepreneur, a better mom now because I know how to juggle all the things now, or, a happier spouse and all those things. It just like trickles down on everything, when you're able to take all those lessons and like, just move forward and, like in a positive way with what you've learned.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say is one of your biggest standout lessons or aha moments that you've had on this journey?
It's definitely to not be so like obsessive of having a timeline. I
Hmm.
I'm someone who has always been very like high achieving. I run marathons,
Hmm.
and I actually went through IVF with my daughter to have my daughter, and so it was always like, okay, like when my first kid is this old, this is when we're gonna try for the second one. We're gonna have that baby, and then I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna run this marathon, and when that started to not work out the way I wanted it to, it was really frustrating. And I just felt like that, like, oh my God, I have no control over anything. And like, I feel like it's all those lessons about like not like having a goal, but like detaching from it type thing.
Yeah.
So, like trusting that what you want, what you desire is going to come to you in one way or another, but like not being so like having such a tight grip on like when that's going to happen. It's been really hard for me, but I feel like it's one of those things now that I'm like, okay, this new business, it's already growing faster than my first one, but I'm not going to give myself any super stressful goals. I'm not going to say I have to hit this mark by this, this date and this minute and this second. it's just like, okay, this is what I would like to accomplish, but I'm totally open with it taking however long it takes, because I'm just doing what I enjoy, and I'm just serving people that I enjoy serving. And
Yeah.
I know there's more other like that out there, so they'll come to me when, when they're ready. And just having that, like, that trust that, you know, we can manifest those things. We just don't have to be so um, you know, dependent or so, like I said, obsessive of the
Obsessive. Yeah.
of like a specific
Yeah.
time frame.
That's such a big one. I think that detachment is huge for just, it's so funny. I mean, I bet anyone listening has had this experience in some area of their life where it's like you get so focused on something happening exactly how you want it, when you want it, and it doesn't. And then it's almost when you detach or release and you like give up mentally, you're just like, fine, I can't do this, so whatever. And that's when it comes and you're like, oh, okay, okay. But I've seen that over and over in business and life where I'm just like, that detachment is, and that release and that open-headedness is part of the process of creation. I'm like convinced now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
It's part of it. It's part of like having that. And I can also think of like instances where like I'm like, okay, I really want this, and then I get it and I'm like, oh, actually, that's really what I was expecting. I don't really want this anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I think it goes both ways when you can kind of like detach from it and just be open to like it looking at a little bit differently. So, yeah, I mean, for example, my like having my daughter, and it was around the same time as I was um working with a new coach, and I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, it was the most expensive program that I've signed up for ever. And I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have invested in this. And I'm going through, IVF, I'm going through all these like emotional, personal things. Um, and it was like, and at the same time, I'm trying to like grow this business. And it's like, oh, but it was actually the best thing that could have happened, because I felt like they both kind of happened simultaneously, like going through something tough personally and then also trying to grow a business. It kind of like helped me to stay neutral,
Mm.
because I never
Hmm.
wanted to get to a point where I was like super like emotional or super just frustrated in my business. They both kind of helped. Like, so if IVF was starting to get a little too much for me, I would focus on the business. Or if the business was getting too hectic or whatever, then I would focus on IVF. So it was good to have those experiences at the same time, as tough as it was in the moment, and while they were both happening.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about like, so for anyone who's in a similar season of life, or maybe they're thinking of making that career change or starting a business, launching a podcast, like you kind of have experience and perspective in all of those things. What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about taking that next step or starting a next season, but hasn't done it yet?
Yeah, I would say to really trust your instinct and see what it's trying to tell you. Is it a lot of fear? Is it a lot of excitement? A lot of times when we really want something, I feel like we feel more fear than the excitement. So that could
Mm-hmm.
be a
True.
sign, because a lot of times it's just like our mind is really trying to keep us safe. So see how you can make it happen, because I feel like there's always the way to make it happen. If leaving your 9 to 5 is your goal, and maybe maybe you have a little side hustle that you're looking to expand on, or maybe you don't have one yet, but you're like, okay, well, what could I do? Create that plan, like create the different things that you could do, and tune into what makes the most sense for you, and then and then like reverse engineer, like figure out how you could make that happen. Like what will it take? Does it take maybe it takes for you to stay in your job for a little bit, but know that, okay, by the end of this year, I definitely want this business launched by, next spring. I definitely want to have X, Y, and Z. And not that we're not talking about having like those strict time frames and timelines and all that. It's just more about having like a plan if leaving your nine to
Mhm.
five is what you want to do. For me, when I left, I sort of had a plan, but like I said, we weren't like,
Mhm.
it wasn't like, oh, we had been, saving my salary for the past, 3 years.
Right.
It definitely wasn't like that. So it was more of like, okay, like our pros and cons are here. And the, you know, the pros of me leaving my job far outweigh the cons. So even if the
Yeah.
financial aspect of it was a little bit scary, it was still an overall good decision. I mean, 100% I would do that again. So, yeah, I think it's kind of like a long answer to that question, but I feel like it's also very personal because it depends on what someone has going on. But definitely just start to create a plan, start to journal, start to see like what ideas you come up with, and make a plan and get support. Get support. Like I do, like I said, I do wish that I had some kind of support back. Gosh, 7 years ago now, when I left my
Mhm.
corporate job. Um, but that's definitely gonna speed up that process a little bit more for anyone who really wants to make it happen.
I love that. Was pivoting as scary for you after as it was in the beginning? I mean, for me, I feel like I had so much built up around what does it mean to change at every stage that it's happened, right? Like, what does it mean? What are other people going to think? Like, oh man, like if I shift this, am I failing in this aspect? And then I felt like once I actually pivoted, it felt like such a right decision, and it just all that charge that I had around the fear, almost like the fear of starting a business, once you do it, all that charge is gone and you realize that can make decisions, you can make changes, you can be empowered to do that. So just curious to hear for you what your experience was after pivoting. Was it relief? Was it as scary as you made it out to be? Or any thoughts there?
Yeah. So on pivoting, I felt relief. Yeah. I
Hmm.
still so I started my new business, and then I still like I had a couple of clients who still had a few months left in their packages with me, so I just continued working with them. I didn't end their packages early or anything like that, so that felt good for me to do. And then once I was done with that, it was like a big, oh, that's so like relieving. Because then I could really just focus on the new business. Uh, which was also a sign for me because at first I was like, oh, maybe I could do both. And then
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, once I released those last two clients, I was like, no, I can't, at least not group coaching. And the mini agency that I'm, creating is it's just not going to work at the same time. So yeah, it was definitely a sigh of relief there as I finally like completely made the transition over to my new business.
Love that. That's good confirmation too that just that was the right choice or change at that stage. Whenever you kind of feel that feeling and you're like, okay, I'm really done, or I have a chance to do it again, and you're like, no, I actually made the right choice. That's such nice confirmation too for yourself.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, what did I do? No. It was
Hmm.
like, ooh, okay, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that. And I think anyone who's listening and is scared about making the wrong choice, what you say kind of puts it in perspective for me that if at any point you feel like you made a mistake or you made the wrong decision, you can go back and you can correct it at any time. So just kind of permission and freedom there that nothing is final is kind of the overall message. Like this evolution and this process, and that's beautiful versus being wrong.
Yes. And I think that's part of what an entrepreneur is. Like, we're always looking for ways to innovate, to be creative. And that sometimes means having to change things up, whether it means like a completely new business, or maybe it just means like new offerings. But it's all about innovation, I think, and using our gifts to find ways that feel best to us to serve others.
Love that. Well, I'll put in the show notes where people can get in touch with you via direct links, but do you want to share where they can find more about you or connect with you?
Yeah, so I am on Facebook and on Instagram, Julia M. Hickman. So either my Facebook page or my personal page is totally fine. And then Instagram is also Julia M. Hickman, and that's also my website. So everything is kind of easy to find. JuliaMHickman.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here. I feel like you shared so many aha moments on the journey of change and of growth and starting a business and leaving corporate. So I'm really excited to share this with you, but thank you for being here and sharing all that too.
Thank you for having me, Jessica.
If this episode resonated with you, I have two things you are going to love. One is a Bright Life workbook full of practices you can use to get clear on what your version of your brightest life looks like and fearlessly move towards it every day. And another is a Copywriter Starter Kit full of beginning steps to create a copywriting business that gives you the freedom to travel the world working from anywhere, to replace a corporate salary as your own boss, and to do creative work that lights you up every day. It's lessons I've learned in creating my own content business, and I'm excited to share it with you if you're curious about doing the same. I will link these in the show notes. I hope these serve you. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you back here next week as we all pursue our biggest, brightest lives together.